In the bustling heart of a city where secrets and desires intertwine, Victor found himself navigating a world both familiar and unexpectedly tumultuous. It all began at a social gathering, where the charming yet audacious Lainey captivated him with her openness and wit. Little did he know, their connection would unravel a web of emotions, revelations, and encounters that would challenge his understanding of loyalty and love. As Victor's journey unfolds, he discovers that beneath the surface of romantic intrigue lies a deeper narrative of betrayal, resilience, and the unexpected paths life can take when one is forced to confront the truth. A shocking revelation, a twist of fate. Sometimes, a single mistake can illuminate truths you never knew existed. I discovered my wife's infidelity in a way I never could have anticipated. It all unfolded one chaotic evening when I found myself at the police station, wrongfully suspected of a serious crime. This tumultuous period became one of the most challenging yet enlightening phases of my life. Tony Catalano was not the sharpest tool in the shed, but his loyalty was unwavering. Over the years, his boss, Mr. B, had come to appreciate this dedication by entrusting Tony with increasingly significant responsibilities. Now, standing on the brink of his most critical assignment yet, Tony felt the weight of expectation. He was determined to prove Mr. B's faith in him was well placed. As Tony studied the photograph of his target, he noted the imposing black Cadillac Escalade parked in the dimly lit garage. He was aware that Arthur Clark, the CEO of a prominent insurance company, owed Mr. B a substantial debt from a past business deal. Tony's mission was straightforward: remind Clark of the consequences of his overdue payment. His plan was to intimidate Clark without resorting to violence, as corporate types often crumbled under pressure. Tony had done his homework. Arthur Clark was a striking figure, well-groomed with wavy brown hair and piercing deep brown eyes. Driving a brand-new 2022 Escalade, he was often the last executive to leave the office, which meant he would likely be alone in the parking garage. The second-to-last employee had just left, and Tony waited patiently, hidden behind a concrete pillar. As the garage door opened, he was taken aback by how much younger Clark looked compared to his photograph. With a height of 6 feet 4 inches and weighing 255 pounds, Tony was an intimidating presence as he approached Clark's vehicle. "Mr. B isn't happy with you. You're late on your payment," he snarled, only to be met with a bewildered stare. "Who? I don't know anyone named Mr. B," Clark stammered, confusion etched across his face. Tony felt his frustration boiling over. In a moment of panic, he withdrew a gun from his waistband. "Nice try, but if you want to avoid a permanent limp, I suggest you start talking." As Tony spoke, sweat dripped from his palms, causing his grip to falter. In a horrifying moment of miscalculation, the gun went off. The sound echoed violently through the garage, and horror seized Tony as he saw Clark collapse, blood pooling around him. In that instant, Tony's mind raced. He had never envisioned this scenario, his instincts faltered, and he recalled a line from a pirate movie, "Dead men tell no tales." With a chilling resolve, he fired another shot, sealing Clark's fate before hurriedly fleeing the scene. As he left, he cursed himself for failing to notice the difference in the Escalade model year. Meanwhile, Arthur Clark's lifeless body lay sprawled in the garage as frantic calls went unanswered, diverting to voicemail. 10 minutes later, the scene shifted to a bustling dental practice where Dr. Alan Siegel and Dr. Victor Washington were met by police officers asking for Washington. Dr. Washington was taken aback when officers escorted him out in handcuffs, his mind racing with confusion. He waited nervously for his lawyer before finally agreeing to an interview. "I hardly knew Gary Finchel," he explained. "He worked with my wife. I've probably spoken to him fewer than 100 times in 4 years." "What's going on?" Victor demanded, his heart sinking as he learned about Finchel's murder. "Tracy was upset when she heard the news yesterday. She left work early, and I think she might be at home today," he said, trying to piece together the events. The officers exchanged knowing glances, and the tension in the air thickened. "You don't think we'll overlook the affair?" Do you? One officer remarked, her tone sharp. Victor's world shattered as the realization hit him. His wife had been unfaithful. What? You're saying my wife was cheating on me with Gary? He stammered, disbelief etched across his face. The male officer's sarcasm stung. You had no idea, and you didn't retaliate? Come on. As Victor slumped in his chair, his lawyer murmured advice, but the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. I really had no clue, he admitted quietly, staring blankly at the officers. How did you find out? You shot him, Dr. Washington, the officer said flatly. Your wife left 2 messages on his phone about meeting him around the time of the murder. When we pressed her, she confessed. Victor's mind raced. How had it come to this? As he sat in a cold jail cell, the reality of his wife's betrayal sank in, leaving him to grapple with a whirlwind of emotions. This entire ordeal was not only a shocking revelation about his marriage but also an unexpected lesson about trust, loyalty, and the devastating effects of deception. Victor sat in the stark interrogation room, the weight of the last 48 hours pressing down on him. Though the police had yet to charge him, they were required to release him soon if no evidence emerged. Yet, instead of focusing on the looming possibility of murder charges, his mind spiraled into darker territories. His wife, Tracy, had betrayed him. After 26 years of marriage and raising 2 adult children together, he had believed their bond unshakable. Now, doubts flooded his thoughts. How long had the affair lasted? What had pushed Tracy into another man's arms? How had he been so blind to the signs? Just hours ago, he had found himself formally accused of murder. The police deemed him a flight risk, denying him bail. To make matters worse, he couldn't shake the unsettling realization that Tracy hadn't reached out to him since his arrest. Did she suspect he had killed her lover? The thought gnawed at him. Victor recalled a seemingly ordinary Wednesday evening from the previous week. For nearly a year, it had been routine for Tracy to go out for dinner with her close friend, Laura. He had never thought much of it, he trusted her. But on that night, when she returned home around 8, she seemed unusually tense. I didn't see any dishes in the sink. Please tell me you didn't just have Pop-Tarts for dinner again, she said, frustration lacing her voice. Honestly, Vic, you're perfectly capable of cooking. I know you can. Maybe I just don't feel like cooking when I'm alone. I miss you, darling, he replied, trying to bridge the growing chasm between them. I'm not a fan of these girls' nights out. Oh, come on. She retorted, storming off to the shower, her annoyance palpable. Unbeknownst to Victor, Tracy's frustration with him had been building, fueled by her ongoing relationship with Gary Finchel, her boss. Victor had only recently discovered the cracks in their marriage. Tracy, once deeply devoted, hadn't set out to have an affair, but as her friendship with Finchel deepened over the years, so did their connection. Standing at 5 feet 5 inches and weighing 120 pounds, with a curvy figure and shoulder-length straight black hair, Tracy appeared much younger than her 48 years. Yet, as her 50th birthday approached, anxiety gripped her. Finchel, a married man with 2 children of his own, had patiently courted Tracy's affection, skillfully navigating their professional boundaries. He showered her with compliments, boosting her confidence and filling a void Victor had unknowingly left. Over time, Tracy found herself captivated by his attention, leading her down a path she never anticipated. Their affair, conducted in secrecy, became a twisted source of intimacy. They met once or twice a week for clandestine rendezvous and often shared lunch, indulging in stolen moments together at work. Yet, the illicit nature of their relationship only seemed to deepen their bond. On Monday morning, while Victor's lawyer began to handle the financial investigation into the situation, he felt his trust in Tracy dwindling. His children visited him in custody, their expressions a mix of concern and disbelief. They informed him of the sensationalized headlines plastered across tabloids about their father's predicament. "Did you see this one, Dad?" his son Jared remarked, holding up a newspaper with a crude headline about the deceased. I have to give credit to the writer for being clever, at least. That's not funny, Dad. You're in serious trouble, and you're making jokes, his daughter, Dee, chimed in, her voice tinged with worry. I'm sure it will all work out. I didn't commit the crime, I swear, Victor assured them, trying to project calmness even as panic swirled within. But Mom seems convinced otherwise, Jared said hesitantly. We stayed at the house last night, and she spent most of the time calling you a murderer, claiming you couldn't handle the fact that her new man was superior, a better lover. Victor's heart sank at the revelation. I didn't know anything about this until they arrested me, he replied, frustration creeping into his voice. I cared about your mother, but I won't end up in jail just because she's turned promiscuous. I'd like to know who took that jerk out, though. I'd happily shake their hand. The children exchanged incredulous glances. They had always known their father to be honest with them, and the notion that their mother had been deceitful felt like a punch to the gut. Tracy had attempted to rationalize her infidelity, placing the blame squarely on Victor for the murder she insisted he committed. Yes, I had an affair, she had lamented, but your father took a man's life. The press only cares about the sexual aspect of it. Well, if Dad committed murder, it's only because you were involved with this man, Jared shot back. It's all about intimacy. The state authorities, however, were growing suspicious. They had discovered a 9mm pistol alongside the decomposed remains of a large man in a rural area. Days later, ballistics analysis linked the firearm to a high-profile case from the previous spring, infamously dubbed the jilted husband case. Such incidents, where a betrayed husband resorted to violence against a lover, were rare. The deceased was identified as Big Tony Catalano, a minor member of the mafia with ties to George B.S. The web of deceit and betrayal tightened around Victor, leaving him to contemplate not only his own future but the fractured family that lay before him. As the walls closed in, Victor found himself at a crossroads, grappling with the enormity of his situation. Would he be able to clear his name? And could he ever reconcile the shattered trust with the woman he once loved? Despite extensive investigations by both state and local law enforcement, no concrete link could be established between Victor Washington and the man imprisoned for the murder of Gary Finchel. However, renewed interest in the case of the spurned husband reignited media attention, leading to a collaborative effort between journalists and law enforcement to explore any connections between organized crime and the insurance company involved. In an unexpected breakthrough, police identified Arthur Clark as the missing piece of the puzzle. It was a sharp-eyed video technician at a local news station, Rob Conto from Kent News, who first made the connection. While reviewing images of key figures related to both cases, he noticed the striking resemblance between Gary Finchel and his boss, Arthur Clark. Intriguingly, both men drove black Escalades, although Finchel was 2 years older. What if Tony Catalano, the mobster known for his blunders, had mistakenly shot Finchel, believing he was targeting Clark? This theory was proposed during an informal meeting between the investigating officers. Could it be that Finchel's unfortunate fate was merely a coincidence? As the investigation deepened, police began to consider this theory seriously. Employees at the insurance company commented on Clark's meticulous grooming and car preferences, suggesting these were calculated attempts to curry favor with his superior, George Bull. Bull was anything but pleased with Tony Catalano when he learned that the mob hit had gone tragically wrong, resulting in Clark's death. The mafia boss was notorious for his volatile temper, and his frustration boiled over. I told you explicitly not to shoot, you idiot. What part of no shooting didn't you understand? Bull roared at the trembling Catalano. You shot him twice and killed him. Tony, visibly shaken, stammered, I messed up big time, Mr. B. I'm really sorry. The gun slipped out of my hand, I tried to readjust my grip and it just went off. He was bleeding heavily, and I thought he wouldn't make it if I left him there, so I put him out of his misery. Bull paused, contemplating the implications of Tony's actions. Have Andrew take you to our place on East 9th and keep you under wraps for a few days. We'll sort out your exit from town after things settle down. He'll take care of you. Thank you, Mr. B. I appreciate this. I'm truly sorry about what happened, Tony replied gratefully as Bull patted him on the shoulder and nudged him toward the door. Tony's fate took a dramatic turn when it was revealed that the victim was not Arthur Clark but one of his staff members. Clark had left the office earlier that day for a medical appointment. Well, this isn't the worst outcome, Bull commented to his chief aide, Frankie Donnell. It certainly sends a message to Mr. Clark that we can't be underestimated. Still, I had a soft spot for Tony. He was just a lovable fool who understood the importance of keeping things in line. Meanwhile, Tracy's life spiraled downwards after Phil's death. Completely unaware of her husband's knowledge about her affair, she was shocked and terrified by his violent actions. The fact that the police had apprehended Victor and were holding him without bail offered her some solace, but her children were devastated by the fallout from her infidelity. In a desperate attempt to shift the focus away from her betrayal, Tracy attempted to highlight the sensational nature of her lover's murder at the hands of her husband. However, this strategy backfired as the media sensationalized the narrative of a betrayed husband taking lethal action. "You'd think I'm the first woman in the city to ever stray from her marriage," Tracy complained to her colleague, Liz, during a lunch break 2 weeks after the incident. "According to the press, I'm practically the poster girl for infidelity." "Well, it's not every day a jealous husband shoots his wife's lover," Liz remarked, trying to lighten the mood but quickly caught on to Tracy's darkening expression. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make light of it. Everyone here knows about my affair with Gary, but how deep were your feelings for each other, Tracy? Were you in love?" Liz inquired gently. "I did care for Victor, but Gary and I were building something more serious," Tracy admitted, her voice heavy with regret. "It's just a shame we'll never know what could have been. I can't believe Victor is capable of murder. It's true what they say, you never truly know someone." The previous week, Liz had attended Gary's funeral alongside Tracy and a few other colleagues. She recalled the tension in the air as Gary's widow cast hostile glares in Tracy's direction. Tracy had kept her head down, tears staining her cheeks, desperately trying to avoid any confrontation. As for Victor, after spending more than 4 months behind bars, he was overwhelmed with a sense of liberation upon his release. The air outside felt fresher than ever, a feeling he couldn't quite put into words as he walked out of jail alongside his attorney. The district attorney had dropped all charges against him once the police determined that Big Tony Catalana was the true murderer. Lance Weatherman, a longtime friend, drove Victor back to the home he had shared with Tracy for the last 15 years. The sun was shining brightly, and the world outside felt vibrantly alive, a stark contrast to the confines of prison. As Victor stepped into the house, memories flooded back, the walls, the furniture, the little knickknacks that told the story of their life together. "Wow, everything looks exactly as I remember it," he mused, running his fingers over the surfaces as if reconnecting with old friends. Tracy would be at work, but Victor was already preparing for the difficult conversation that awaited him. The past few months had changed everything, and the home he returned to no longer felt like the sanctuary it once was. "I've missed this place so much," Victor murmured as he stepped into the familiar surroundings of his home, a twinge of nostalgia washing over him despite the tumultuous events that had transpired. He approached his well-stocked liquor cabinet, fully aware that his wife, Tracy, had abstained from hard alcohol. It was likely untouched since his arrest. The cabinet boasted an impressive collection, at least 25 bottles of various spirits. "Ah, a moment for celebration calls for a single malt," Victor declared, retrieving a partially filled bottle of Glenmorangie 12-year-old. He poured 2 shots, one for himself and one for his friend Lance, who had been a steadfast ally through his darkest days. "Thanks for sticking by me, Lance. Your support means more than just a paycheck," he expressed sincerely, as they both raised their glasses and took a sip in silence. The atmosphere felt heavy, especially as Lance absent-mindedly tapped his fingers on a manila folder resting on the table. "Why do you think Tracy hasn't divorced me while I was locked up?" Victor inquired, his brow furrowing with concern. Initially, It might have been due to the chaos surrounding your situation, especially with all the media buzz. Later, she might have thought you'd handle everything from prison, Lance speculated, leaning back in his chair. Victor sighed. The kids mentioned she was convinced I murdered her lover and held a grudge. So it's surprising she hasn't filed yet. Maybe she's had a change of heart, Lance suggested thoughtfully. After all, Gary's gone, the kids are upset with her. She's practically become a real-life Cruella de Vil. What's that saying? Making the best out of a bad situation? As they exchanged wary glances, Victor's phone buzzed. Meanwhile, Tracy was startled as she pulled into her driveway, noticing an unfamiliar car parked there. At first, she thought it was just another reporter seeking a sensational story. But her heart dropped when she realized someone was already inside her home. Hastily, she dialed 911, providing the dispatcher with every detail she could muster. Moments later, 2 uniformed officers entered the Washington residence, and her breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God! What are you doing here?" she exclaimed upon spotting Victor. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I live here," Victor said, hands raised in surrender. "I'm Vic Washington. I was just released from jail a few hours ago. Even got the DA to apologize to me," he added, trying to maintain a sense of composure amid the tension. "I'm his attorney," Lance interjected, stepping forward as one of the officers verified their statements, leaving Tracy in stunned silence. "Just another pawn in a sad tale of misfortune," Victor remarked. "I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Besides, why would I risk jail for someone like you? You seriously overestimate yourself." Tracy's face flushed with embarrassment, and she lowered her gaze as the officers prepared to leave. Lance, however, had one more thing to address. He handed Tracy a manila envelope, saying, "You've been served." "I'm not sure I want a divorce," Tracy murmured, glancing up at Victor with uncertainty. "I truly believed you were responsible for Gary's death, but since you weren't, maybe there's still a chance for us. Are you completely delusional?" Victor shot back, frustration boiling over. "Forget everything else. Your infidelity landed me in jail for over 4 months. You praised him to the kids, called him a better man, a better lover. I won't settle for Gary Finch's leftovers." As he processed the chaos of the day, Victor felt a wave of gratitude for Alan Siegel, his business partner, and Alan's wife, Marilyn. They had been his unwavering support through the ordeal of wrongful imprisonment and the subsequent divorce. The Siegels made regular visits to Victor in jail, ensuring he wasn't alone, while Alan worked long hours to manage Victor's workload in his absence. After taking a week off to readjust to his life, Victor returned to work, astounded by the kindness and support from those around him. Many went out of their way to offer words of encouragement, even sharing their contact information with him on slips of paper. Despite feeling embarrassed, Victor accepted these gestures, not wanting to offend anyone. It dawned on him how profoundly the media had influenced public perception. His friends, children, and even Alan and Marilyn highlighted how sympathetic portrayals in the press contrasted sharply with the negative light cast upon Tracy and Gary. At a cozy upscale restaurant, Marilyn reached for Victor's hand, concern etched on her face. "What's going on, Vic? It's been 2 years. You seem focused, but your heart isn't in it," she noted, her gaze steady. Victor met her eyes, recognizing the unwavering support she and Alan had offered. "Things aren't the same anymore. I can engage with women, even have physical relationships, but there's a void. There's no real connection," he admitted. "I understand that sex can exist without love, but that's not what I'm after," he continued, sighing deeply. "Vic, you're not going to find the connection on the first, second, or even third date. Remember how you felt for Tracy? It took time to get to know each other. Love doesn't happen overnight," Marilyn reasoned gently. "You're rushing it, expecting the one to miraculously appear. You go out a couple of times, then move on. It doesn't work like that." "But I'm 52, not 22, Victor protested. "I don't have the luxury of time." Time for love, Vic. Come on. Aging doesn't make time move faster. If it's meant to be, it'll happen, but you have to give it a chance first, Marilyn urged, annoyance creeping into her voice. Unbeknownst to her, she was perhaps the only person who could truly reach Victor. To that end, she and Alan began hosting intimate gatherings every few months, always ensuring there were several single women present, including Victor. He was aware of Marilyn's intentions and felt a mix of gratitude and reluctance at her matchmaking efforts. As the evening wore on, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that life was presenting him with a second chance, both in love and in the connections he had nearly lost. Victor turned to Alan, a playful grin on his face. "You'd better watch your step, buddy. If Marilyn ever decides to move on, she's got a whole lineup of stunning women just waiting to catch her eye." Alan chuckled, lighting one of the 4 citronella torches that adorned the spacious deck of the Seagull. Just then, Victor's gaze fell on Marilyn. He couldn't help but admire her figure in those fitted jeans, the way her top rode up slightly, exposing a smooth patch of skin. When she turned around, he found himself frozen, a smile lingering on his lips until he realized she was looking directly at him. All he could manage was a stammered, His mind was racing, overwhelmed by her presence. The woman before him was petite, no taller than 5 feet and weighing maybe 100 pounds. Yet, Victor couldn't help but notice that a significant portion of that weight seemed to be distributed quite attractively. As her arms hung relaxed by her sides, he could make out a hint of defined core muscles that hinted at her fitness. "I get that a lot," she said confidently, breaking the silence. "Pardon?" Victor replied, finally focusing on her face. She was Asian American, with large, expressive eyes and straight black hair cascading over her shoulders. The moment she saw the recognition dawning on his face, she continued, "I'm just joking. You're not the first guy to take a moment to register that I'm Asian. It usually takes a bit for men to meet my gaze." No, that's not what I meant," Victor exclaimed, perhaps a touch too loudly, catching the attention of a few nearby guests. She raised an eyebrow and gestured for him to lower his voice, causing him to blush deeper than he thought possible. "I'm Dr. Victor Washington," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I've been Alan's business partner for quite a while." "I know you from the news," she replied, catching the slight grimace on his face. "I'm Lainey Brand, mostly a friend of Marilyn's." "I didn't mean to offend you with my comment about the news. I suppose it's similar to people avoiding eye contact when they talk to me." "Fair point," Victor conceded. "How about we grab a drink? We can chat while I try to maintain eye contact, and you can pretend I'm not a bumbling idiot whose wife just embarrassed him in front of everyone." Lainey found herself at a loss for words, momentarily surprised by his candidness. Yet, a shy smile crept onto her lips as she replied, Sure." For the next hour, Victor and Lainey engaged in lively conversation. He was surprised at how easily they clicked, but soon realized he had been dominating their exchange. Sensing the social awkwardness creeping in, he apologized and suggested they mingle with other guests. "I didn't mean to hog your time," he admitted. Lainey smiled, reassuring him that she was enjoying their chat, and they parted ways to explore the gathering. However, Victor couldn't help but keep a discreet eye on her for the rest of the evening. Alan, ever the observer, teased Victor about the strain he must be feeling from constantly looking over his shoulder. "Why don't we swap places so you can get a clearer view without straining your neck?" he joked. Victor sighed, recognizing that his attempt to play it cool was failing miserably. Alan then filled him in on some background about Lainey. "She's 3 years younger than you, a longtime friend of Marilyn's, and works as a reference librarian. She's been single for a while after her 20-year marriage ended because of her husband's infidelity." Victor raised an eyebrow, surprised. How could someone like Lainey stay single for so long? Does she have sky-high standards? "She's well respected among friends, but she's also selective about who she dates," Alan explained. "She's not rushing into anything unless it's with the right person." Victor nodded thoughtfully, appreciating the insight. As the night wore on, He and Lainey didn't reconnect. She slipped away without him getting her number, but he wasn't worried, he knew Marilyn had it. 2 days later, Victor decided it was time to call Marilyn. He didn't need to explain why he was calling, she seemed to know. "You have remarkable self-control," Marilyn teased, skipping the pleasantries. "Or maybe you're just plain stupid." Surprised, Victor replied, "I was trying to play it cool, not seem desperate." "Did you really start with an A?" Marilyn laughed. "Why bother stressing about looking cool when you blew it with that 2-letter word? Or maybe it was the drooling." Victor was grateful that Marilyn couldn't see how deeply he was blushing. "So, are you going to dial her number right away or spend another 2 days overthinking it?" she challenged. "We all know you're quite the master debater. Can you just give me her number?" he replied, feeling a mix of exasperation and excitement. "Sure, but remember what I said about building a relationship instead of just waiting for it to happen," she cautioned. The very next day, Victor reached out to Lainey, inviting her to dinner and a movie that Friday. He chose a fancy Italian restaurant, allowing her to pick the film. "Are you trying to impress me with this restaurant?" Lainey asked, raising an eyebrow. "Did Marilyn mention I have Italian heritage?" "Honestly, I didn't know," Victor replied. "I just didn't want to take an Asian woman to a Chinese, Japanese, or Korean restaurant. Well, I'm mostly Chinese, but my other ancestry is where I get this," she said, adjusting her posture to emphasize her curves. "I know when people think of Chinese, they often picture a gymnast, but double Ds aren't exactly the norm." Victor felt his cheeks burn, caught off guard yet intrigued by her boldness. Victor couldn't shake the feeling of surprise as he glanced at Lainey, who was unabashedly discussing her well-endowed figure. It was unusual for him to encounter a woman so confident about her attributes, and her boldness caught him off guard. When their eyes met, she flashed a playful smirk. "I apologize if I come across as too forward. Didn't Marilyn give you a heads up about me?" she asked, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Not really," Victor admitted, scratching the back of his head. "Marilyn usually makes sure to invite a few single women to these gatherings but keeps me in the dark about them. She says I need to put in the effort myself." Lainey burst into laughter, her joyous sound filling the room. Victor quickly realized she had no reservations about expressing her amusement. "That's my girl," she cheered, her laughter contagious. It was clear to him that Lainey wore her heart on her sleeve. She didn't just laugh openly, she also cried without hesitation, as he witnessed during a late-night outing for dessert and coffee. As they watched a romantic film, Lainey's tears flowed freely during a poignant scene. Later, she confided in Victor that her emotional response was tied to her own life. Her father had passed away, much like the father of the film's heroine. Victor was touched by her vulnerability, and it deepened his interest in her. After 2 days of contemplation, Victor called Lainey to set up another date, which she eagerly accepted for that weekend. Their chemistry blossomed, leading to their 5th date, which ended with both of them sharing a bed at Victor's apartment. It felt like a natural progression of their connection, filled with laughter and warmth. A month later, over lunch, Marilyn couldn't contain her curiosity about Lainey's blossoming relationship with Victor. Why on earth would his ex-wife let him go? "He's handsome, fit, and a true gentleman," she exclaimed, her eyebrows raised. Lainey felt a flush creep up her cheeks. "He even keeps in touch with me most of the time, except when I wear that red silk dress," she replied with a teasing grin. "I'd be surprised if any man could focus on anything else but my cleavage in that." Both women laughed, knowing that Dr. Victor Washington might as well have been a married man at that point. In reality, it would take another 6 months before Victor would tie the knot. When the announcement of his wedding appeared in the local paper, it garnered a mere mention, unlike the sensational coverage that followed his tumultuous past. The media was relentless, delving into the scandal surrounding his ex-wife's infidelity. In the aftermath, George Boole, a prominent figure in the local scene, erupted in frustration during a phone call with his colleague Arthur Clarke. "Every time they make headlines, There's another article about the jilted husband. The press won't leave it alone. He hurled a newspaper across the room, his irritation palpable. That woman who cheated still works for you, doesn't she? He demanded. Yeah, Clark replied, unsure of where the conversation was heading. Get rid of her, Boole insisted, his voice low and intense. Send her somewhere the press won't find her. 2 weeks later, Tracy Washington found herself relocated to a small office in Paducah, Kentucky. The ongoing media scrutiny had made her nearly unemployable elsewhere, despite a favorable financial settlement from her divorce. With no family or social life to lean on, her job was all she had left. Meanwhile, Victor was taken aback when he discovered a sealed note from George Boole on his desk one Monday morning. His curiosity piqued. He opened it to find an unconventional invitation. Boole wanted to meet him for lunch that very day at noon, just the two of them. Victor had never met Boole face to face, but he was aware of the rumors surrounding the man, particularly his alleged connection to the downfall of the man involved with his unfaithful partner. Feeling the weight of the situation, Victor understood he couldn't afford to ignore this meeting. After a thorough security check, he was escorted into Boole's office by a towering figure who seemed to have had a rough morning. A lavish Italian lunch was already set up on the table when he entered. Boole greeted Victor, shook his hand, and gestured for him to take a seat. It's just us here, and this office gets swept for bugs daily, so we can speak freely, Boole said, his tone serious. I owe you an apology of sorts, he continued. As you probably know, I'm the one who changed the course of your life. It was a monumental mistake, and I assure you, you were never meant to be caught up in it. Honestly, I didn't even know who you or your wife were. Mr. Boole, if I may interject, Victor said, surprising Boole with a radiant smile, there's really no need for you to apologize. In fact, you did me a tremendous favor. Boole looked at Victor as if he had grown a second head, his surprise evident. Victor took a sip of the Pappy Van Winkle 15-year-old bourbon that Boole had poured for him, a smile spreading across his face. Ah, this is truly fantastic, he remarked, noticing Boole's keen gaze on him, waiting for an explanation. Oh, right. Sorry about that. What I meant to say is that I had no idea my unfaithful wife was cheating on me. You not only brought that to my attention, but you also did something I had only ever dreamed about, you took care of her lover. The way you handled him was quite clever, especially revoking his masculinity. I hope your associate gave him a moment to process it before the final blow. Spending 4.5 months in jail was a small price to pay for what he did, so thank you, sincerely, for that. Boole raised his glass in acknowledgement, his demeanor softening. Well, if you are at peace with it, then I'll stop feeling guilty. Cheers. The two men clinked their glasses together, downing their shots, a newfound understanding settling between them.